Henry Foster never imagined that the simple presence of Camille Taylor, a humble carpenter, teaching his deaf daughter in the privacy of the penthouse would change not only his world, but also his fear and guilt. A secret revealed, a mistake made, and a forbidden yet necessary love about to blossom. The sun began to disappear behind the buildings in the upscale neighborhood of New York when Camille Taylor closed the door of her small workshop for another day. The environment was simple: dust-covered walls, tools hanging haphazardly, and the scent of freshly cut wood lingering in the air. Her hands, marked by years of hard work, held the phone that wouldn't stop vibrating. An unexpected message. Contract confirmed for Mr. Henry Foster's penthouse. An intense mix of relief and anxiety flooded her chest. She knew this was more than just a job. It was a chance to change the course of her life and, most importantly, that of her 3 children. She took a deep breath and saved the message. Tomorrow she would face a world very different from her own, a world of luxury, rules, and hierarchies she didn't fully understand, but was willing to navigate. The next day, the taxi glided over the hot asphalt of Fifth Avenue to the garage of the imposing building where Henry Foster lived, a respected and feared figure in the real estate industry. Upon entering the lobby, Camille felt the curious eyes of the security guards, her simple uniform contrasting with the fragrant air and refined decor of the lobby. The elevator ascended almost silently to the top floor. The doors opened to a vast room marked by the shine of floor-to-ceiling windows. The panoramic view of the city stretched endlessly, while a faint aroma of fine woods mingled with the subtle scent of fresh flowers. Camille began to work meticulously on the installation of the shelves planned for the millionaire's daughter's room. Each tool in her hands seemed to weigh less against the growing nervousness inside her. As she was adjusting the last piece, she noticed a silent presence, a small girl with a curious and shy look standing at the glass door of the balcony. Lily, Henry's deaf daughter. The girl's eyes fixed on the carpenter, who couldn't help but smile gently. She crouched down, lowering her voice. "Hi, Lily, I'm Camille. I'm here to make your room more beautiful and comfortable. Would you like to show me what you like?" The girl smiled shyly, making slow movements with her hands. Camille recognized the silent language that holds stories and feelings. She tried to respond with her own gestures, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. In those small interactions, a bridge emerged, breaking the ice of distance and silence. Before she could delve deeper into that moment, the door to the room opened. Henry entered, crossing the space with an air of authority and almost palpable tension. His gaze met hers and Lily's, freezing the moment in time. His grey eyes, so relentless in business, showed a vulnerability he barely admitted. The fear of losing Lily to a world he couldn't control, the weight of guilt for the traumatic separation from the girl's mother, and the overprotection he maintained. "I didn't expect to find this here," he said, his voice firm, but with a closed tone that revealed discomfort. "Camille, I need you to understand the rules. Lily isn't used to strangers." Camille straightened her body, her hands steady despite her nervousness. "Henry, Lily can't live in isolation. She has the right to learn, play, and grow with dignity. I'm here to help with that, respecting everything that's necessary." The distance between them seemed to shrink with that statement. Camille saw the girl inching closer, her eyes shining with a silent hope. The millionaire took a deep breath, pressing his lips together. "I take care of what's mine," he replied. "But perhaps I underestimated what you can do here." Lily watched, fascinated, the interactions of the adults. The carpenter lightly touched her hand, a gesture of affection that seemed to say more than any words. Henry stepped back a few paces, absorbing the weight of that unexpected moment. "Just don't lose sight of the fact that things work a certain way here," he warned, with a look that mixed protection and caution. The silence that formed gave way to the distant sound of the city below, the fast-paced rhythm of New York echoing an invitation for changes that no one could yet foresee. As Camille continued her work, she felt that something greater than a simple contract was beginning, a story that would cross lifestyles, break prejudices, and make her heart and Henry's and Lily's beat in unison, despite fears and doubts. Night was approaching, and with it the promise that no social barrier could prevent the true meeting of souls destined to recognize each other. Thus, amid the scent of fresh wood and the welcoming silence of the room, the first chapter of an unexpected bond was being drawn, teaching that love arises where least expected and flourishes even in the most unlikely ground. The sound of the drill dissipated into the silence of the spacious penthouse. Camille stepped down from the small ladder, her face slightly damp with sweat, and her hands marked by the fine sawdust still lingering in the air. Lily, sitting on the plush rug just laid down, watched the installed shelves with an almost childlike curiosity, her eyes shining with a mix of wonder and shy joy. This was not just a renovation. It was the first step towards rebuilding a new and safe world for the girl who had until then lived confined within invisible walls. Henry remained leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, his hard gaze softened by the hesitation he tried to disguise. The businessman who dominated meetings and commanded empires now faced a situation that no amount of money or contract could resolve. "I know it won't be easy for any of us," he began, his voice a little lower, laden with emotion. A weariness that seemed to pierce the heart. "Lily has her own timing, her own barriers. I don't want her to be hurt, to suffer again. I confess that there are things that frighten me." Camille placed her hands on her hips and stared at him firmly, feeling the almost physical weight of that distrust and fear. "I'm not here to hurt anyone, Henry. Lily cannot remain trapped in this isolation. She deserves to discover the world, to feel capable, to know she is loved just as she is. I want to help, respecting each step without rushing." The little girl approached cautiously, extending her hand to Camille, seeking a connection that represented a bridge between loneliness and hope. Camille intertwined her fingers around the fragile, warm hand, conveying calm and security. Henry looked at them, the coldness in his expression softening, but a careful firmness still marked his voice. "This is my world, Camille, and I protect it fiercely. I cannot allow this to be lost. Even so, perhaps I underestimated what you can do here." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Just be careful. Things work a certain way here." He closed the door with a soft click, the echoes of his footsteps resonating in the silent hallway, leaving a trail of tension and expectation. Camille took a deep breath, knowing that this was the beginning of much more than just a job. It was the start of something that would touch their hearts, transcend prejudices, and establish a bond between that unlikely triangle. In the following days, the routine changed drastically. Mornings were dedicated to caring for the children in a modest home in Brooklyn. Afternoons immersed in the adaptations of the luxurious penthouse. Camille renovated, installed, and invented solutions so that every detail was designed for Lily. Adapted furniture, safe corners, soft lighting. Each shy smile from the girl was a spark of strength for her to continue, even in the face of physical and emotional exhaustion. Meanwhile, Henry navigated between stern commitments and his furtive moments of observation. He didn't know whether he admired more Camille's tireless determination or the delicacy with which Lily began to blossom. That simple woman, with her calloused hands, awakened a hope he didn't even dare to admit. On a sweltering afternoon, the ticking of the clock seemed to speed up time. Lily was fidgeting, her anxiety growing like a trapped wave. Camille knelt down, pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil from her bag, and began to sketch, drawings made with love, hands in motion, open hearts, gentle symbols of American Sign Language. The girl watched attentively, then repeated, her eyes shining. Henry entered almost unnoticed. He stopped, fascinated by the scene of learning and affection. His voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. "She's learning quickly." Camille smiled, the pride evident in the sparkle of her eyes. She just needed someone to see her worth. "Lily is stronger than many think," she said, holding her breath to contain the emotion. He walked over to them, his expression softened, his eyes misty for the first time in years that weren't filled with solitary pain. "Thank you for everything," he murmured, unable to find more suitable words. However, the peace of that budding alliance soon began to be threatened. The apartment, once a refuge, became a stage for veiled judgments and disapproving glances. Whispers and speculations circulated in the building's hallways, and even the discreet resistance from the Foster family created increasing pressure on Camille and Henry. She felt the silent call of prejudice, the invisible struggle against social stigmas that suddenly appeared like walls when least expected. Henry dealt with voices from partners and family members who feared losing control and status. But even under the weight of these storms, the bond between them grew, fueled by small daily victories, a sign learned, a genuine smile, a shared gesture of trust. They still didn't know that greater trials awaited them, decisions that would require courage, truth, and the difficult act of trusting fully. Amid this whirlwind of emotions and challenges, Camille, Lily, and Henry began to build a story that would show that love recognizes no classes, titles, or walls erected by fear. It was the beginning of a silent revolution, pulsing with the strength of hearts that allow themselves the impossible. Under the orange sky of the New York sunset, in that penthouse that had once been just an empty space, the flame of hope ignited, the promise of a future where love, courage, and acceptance would be the true architects of destiny. The sun was already beginning to descend on the horizon, tinting New York in golden and lilac hues, when Camille closed the door of the apartment with a sigh that mixed exhaustion and determination. That morning, she realized that her life had completely changed. Amid sawdust, signs, and challenging glances, she was building a bridge between worlds as distant as the streets of Brooklyn and the skyscrapers of the Upper East Side. As she entered the living room, her attention was immediately captured by Lily, who was engrossed in a drawing. The girl held the pencil with unprecedented concentration, her small hands tracing lines that seemed to say much more than words could express. When she noticed Camille's presence, she looked up and flashed a shy smile, that silent achievement rooted in that simple and genuine interaction. "Look who's here!" Camille smiled, approaching carefully so as not to interrupt the girl's focus. "What are you drawing?" Lily pointed to a delicate figure, two intertwined hands, symbolizing the bond that was beginning to be forged in that unusual home. "Is it you and me?" Camille asked, her voice soft, emotional. The girl nodded, and that moment became etched in Camille's memory as a breath of hope. But not everything was easy on this path of reconstruction. In the hallways and dinners of high society, Camille and Lily's presence began to echo uncomfortably for some. Disapproving glances and subtle whispers. The tensions became frequent, making Henry feel the weight of resistance around him, especially from the Foster family, who saw that union as a threat to their carefully constructed prestige and order. In a tense meeting at the company office, Henry faced the cold gaze of his uncle Carlos Foster, a man with a rigid posture and a cutting speech. "You know this could harm the business, Henry," Carlos warned, his fingers drumming on the mahogany table. "The press is already starting to speculate about your family. The class difference, we cannot allow this to tarnish our name." Henry closed his eyes for a moment, a reflection of frustration and conflict. His voice came out firm, but with an emotional weight that was hard to hide. "Lily is my daughter, and Camille, she is the one taking care of her when I can't. What we do is not philosophy. It is love and responsibility." "Love?" Carlos smirked ironically. In our world, reality is different. You risk losing the support of important investors if you continue with this madness. As Henry felt the pressure breaking his usual control, Camille faced her own ghosts. At home, she argued with her sister about her fears and insecurities. "You won't withstand the judgment, Camille. They are capable of destroying anyone who steps out of their designated place," her sister warned, her tone heavy with concern. "I can't just turn my back on them. Lily deserves more than this," Camille replied, her voice trembling but her eyes firm. Overcoming came slowly, built on a hard ground of doubts, criticisms, and unspoken expectations. In the apartment, Henry tried to be the absent father but present as much as possible, while Camille became the bridge between the elitist universe and the world of simplicity and warmth that Lily represented. They spent hours teaching signs, describing emotions, sharing moments that defied any stereotype. On a rainy night, after a tense dinner filled with silences, Henry returned to the apartment frustrated. Camille welcomed him with a silent hug, feeling the battle he was fighting against the ghosts of the past and the pressures of the present. "Please, don't go," she murmured, holding his trembling hands. "Lily misses you." He nodded, and in that embrace there was more than comfort, a silent promise that despite the stumbles they would not give up. The bond between them, established through delicate gestures and silent glances, began to reveal an unexpected chemistry, a tension that did not always find words to express itself, but grew strong, breaking down resistances and building a renewed truth. The greatest challenge, however, was yet to come. News of impending financial troubles threatened to shake Henry's world. Impatient partners, merger risks, and the shadow of a possible recession created a storm that could ruin all efforts to preserve that fragile family. At the same time, Camille received a tempting offer for a project downtown. It was the chance to finally grow, to accept a permanent job that would change her life, but it would distance her from Lily and Henry, in a decision that tore her heart between ambition and loyalty. On a tense night, amidst deep conversations and improvised plans, they decided to face whatever came together, even without a guarantee of victory. The city that never sleeps watched, indifferent to the pains and hopes of those three who, despite their differences, shared a destiny sculpted in the purest human feeling. Under the heavy sky, the promise of transformation shone like a beacon. It didn't matter the past, nor the prejudices, or the invisible barriers. Love, indeed, was the force capable of breaking down walls and building new paths. The early morning in New York was a dark veil sprinkled with yellow lights that pulsed like attentive hearts high above the skyscrapers. In the quiet office of Hudson Corp, Henry walked slowly across the area rug, stretched before the immense mahogany desk. The news arriving that day was not good. The market was faltering, investors were pressing, and to make matters worse, rumors of an unwanted merger were beginning to circulate in the background, threatening his authority. He felt the weight of the world collapse on his shoulders, a burden he couldn't share with the image of a strong and impenetrable man he cultivated. In the deep silence, his phone vibrated. A short and unexpected message. "Camille has a proposal for you. They need to talk." Those words still echoed in his mind when he abruptly turned off the office lights and headed for the elevator, his body tense with anticipation. Hours later, in the modest kitchen of Camille's apartment, the warm aroma of fresh coffee contrasted with the heavy atmosphere. After an exhausting day, she was trying to organize her thoughts when she gently spoke about the invitation she received to lead a renovation project downtown, a vital step for her career, a well-deserved achievement after so many years of struggle. But the project required more than a simple yes. It meant leaving Lily under Henry's care for longer periods and possibly opening a new front of challenges for the already unstable emotional balance of the girl. Henry listened attentively, his hands firmly on the table, his eyes searching for something Camille was hiding in her gestures and voice. "It sounds perfect for you," he said, trying to hide the insecurity that was invading his chest. "But what about Lily? And us?" His words came out heavy with doubt. "I don't want to lose what we've built." She smiled without courage, her gaze reflecting the conflict between the desire to grow and the need to care. "Neither do I want to, Henry. But I can't ignore this chance. It's a double-edged sword." The silence that followed was heavy, a brief storm between them raised by waves of fear and hope. They heard in the distance the distant noise of the city, the incessant sound of lives that do not stop, even when, as doubts seemed greater, at that moment they opted for the raw truth of their partnership, sealing a pact. They would be a team, even if on separate paths. Henry would face the challenges at the company, striving to keep the empire intact. Camille would fight to carve out her space and secure Lily's future. Neither of them knew how much stability remained, but the promise of trying together eased the chill of uncertainty. The following weeks were a whirlwind of opposing emotions. The late afternoons, once filled with signs and affection, became rare, taken over by relentless meetings and trips that Henry had to undertake to manage the damage at the company. Camille, in turn, dealt with the pressure of her new job, the distant cordiality of clients from downtown, and the constant longing for the girl and the man who was beginning to occupy an increasing space in her thoughts. Lily felt her mother's absence as a difficult void to fill, but she showed progress with Henry. He surprisingly took on the role more naturally than he expected, even though every night, as he closed the door to the girl's room, the weight of responsibility threatened to suffocate him. One sleepless dawn, Henry gazed at the emptiness of the city through the window. On his phone, he found a message from his sister, with a tone as cold as the distance that was beginning to grow between them. "Who is this woman, Henry? You are sinking everything we built." Ilah. Those words hurt more than any financial pressure. He knew that the Foster family was determined to regain control and that the alliance with Camille was a target. On the other side of the city, Camille cried alone in a silent apartment, feeling that her personal struggle was becoming increasingly arduous. The feeling of being alone in front of a system that does not forgive tightened her throat. But on a sunny afternoon, an unexpected visit changed the scene. Ray, Camille's childhood neighbor and voice of reason, appeared with an invitation. "Camille, I'm helping a group that supports mothers and children in difficult situations. We can provide strength for you and Lily." The words brought relief and a new wave of courage. It was a reminder that even in the chaos of the big city, there was solidarity and space to reinvent connections. That same week, Henry received a decisive call. One of the main partners wanted to schedule an urgent meeting to discuss his continued leadership at Hudson Corp. The atmosphere anticipated a battle where even financial facts would not be enough to define the fate of the man and the family. In the cold and calculating meeting, Henry faced veiled accusations, harsh criticisms, and treacherous proposals that tested his resilience. Among the crisp words, he realized that this was not just a power struggle, but a clash against everything that threatened his right to happiness. As he left the table, his face impassive, he felt Camille's firm hand pulling his in the crowd. "No matter what comes," she whispered, "we will make it, together." And in that handshake, amid glances that spoke more than any speech, the partnership that would challenge conventions, overcome prejudices, and ignite a love capable of changing destinies was sealed. Above them, the dark sky flashed, announcing storms, but also the invincible force of hope, the kind that is born when one chooses to believe, even against everything and everyone. The darkness of the New York night covered the towering buildings, while Camille's modest apartment remained lit, illuminated by the yellow light of the bedside lamp in the room where Lily slept. The girl hugged her worn teddy bear with a slight expression of unease, as if the world she knew was transforming with every breath. Camille, sitting on the edge of the bed, watched her daughter's tranquil face, trying to absorb all the strength possible to face the uncertain future. Ray's arrival in the previous weeks had been an oasis in the desert of loneliness that accompanied her. The old friend, with his simple and welcoming manner, introduced her to a group that supported mothers in vulnerable situations. They were people willing to lend a hand, to share the weight of the struggle that Camille had felt so alone in carrying until then. The possibility of receiving concrete help to support Lily and herself gave Camille the courage she needed to move forward. Meanwhile, Henry lived restless days. The pressure from the partners at Hudson Corp did not lessen, and meetings continued to turn into veiled battlefields. In the last one, once again, he found himself in a fragile position. He spoke firmly, yet felt the quicksand threatening to undermine his influence. The criticisms about his connection with Camille, subtly dismissed as a personal diversion, and about the company's direction were hard blows to ignore. When the meeting ended, his exit was silent, but not solitary. Amid the muffled crowd of the corporate lobby, he felt Camille's firm hand holding his with a determination that filled him with strength. "No matter what comes," she whispered, looking deeply into his eyes. "We will make it. Together." Henry squeezed her hand in a gesture that spoke more than words, as if in that touch he found the resistance he needed to face whatever lay ahead. The following days were a dance between absences and brief encounters. Camille dedicated herself to the project work downtown, facing suspicious glances from clients and partners who never ceased to judge her modest background and the path she had traveled. She heard venomous phrases. "You don't understand how this world works. This isn't a place for someone from where you come." But amid the harshness, Ray's proposal and his group never faded, reminding her that she was not alone. Meanwhile, Henry delved deeper into the dark side of corporate power that he needed to tame. The threats from the Foster family, the veiled sabotage from the partners, and the insecurity about the future of Hudson Corp loomed large. The silence of the penthouse was occasionally broken by the sound of rain outside and the weight of decisions that needed to be made. One Saturday, a different kind of day, disrupted that heavy routine. Driven by a new and confusing feeling, Henry organized a simple barbecue in the common area of the condominium. The event was a timid step toward bringing neighbors from such distinct worlds together around common experiences. The smell of grilling meat, the almost forgotten laughter, the brief but genuine conversations. There, amidst bites of bell pepper and forkfuls of cornbread, Henry looked at Camille and Lily and realized that, even surrounded by animosities and prejudices, there was an unexplored space for happiness. But the ground supporting that moment was fragile. Soon came the news of an audit at the company, a concrete threat that could not only destabilize the business, but also shake the fragile structures of the family they were forming. Faced with this, life forced Henry to decide, to uphold an empire built on harsh traditions or to bet on a new path, where he would need to relinquish control to gain something greater. On a night marked by thunder cracking in the sky and cold winds scratching the windows, Camille and Henry found themselves in his apartment. Between contained tears and almost whispered voices, they revealed their deepest vulnerabilities. "I don't want to lose you," Henry said, breaking the rigid posture he maintained. "Not for real." "You won't," Camille replied, squeezing his hand. "We are stronger than the storms. Together." For a moment, the noise of the storm was drowned out by the pulsing of their hearts, beating in the same rhythm. The class difference that once seemed like a chasm was now transforming into a bridge. A love that grew insistently, stubbornly, and powerfully, capable of withstanding any attack. New York, the impersonal giant, continued its indifferent night. But for them, that moment was the beginning of a silent revolution, a daily struggle to break down prejudices, to form a new family where what mattered was true love. From then on, amidst losses and gains, fear and hope, they would walk side by side, against all odds, ready to change their lives and the world that insisted on closing doors. Courage was not just a product of certainty, but above all, faith in what they wished to build, a new story, made of resistance and passion. The early hours of the morning advanced silently through the city that never sleeps. But in Camille's small kitchen, time seemed to slow down to the rhythm of the restless thoughts burning in her chest. The steaming coffee rested in her trembling hands. The yellowish light of the lamp cast shadows that danced on the peeling walls, mirroring the oscillation of her emotions. The invitation to that charity event still echoed in her mind like a challenge that went far beyond expectations. Crossing the red carpet of New York's high society had been an act of courage that brought her more than just disapproving glances and whispers, a direct confrontation with the prejudices that tried to confine her to her humble origins. Each step in that hall, filled with false smiles and empty words, was a cruel reminder that the chasm between their realities was still wider than it remained invisible. Despite this, a persistent fire burned within her, a refusal to accept that her place was determined by where she was born or who she knew. Each morning that followed, Camille rebuilt her determination, not just for herself, but for Lily, for the life they insisted on denying her. Henry, on his side of the city, faced battles as fierce as Camille's internal struggles. The news of the audit initiated by members of the Foster family was a real and palpable threat that could destabilize everything he fought to keep alive. Amid reports, late meetings, and discreet phone calls, he walked the razor's edge of corporate power. But in the midst of that turmoil, finding refuge in Camille, where he could be vulnerable, was something that began to shape his hardened soul. The tension within Hudson Corp was not limited to financial actions. Among formal dinners and closed meetings, the resistance to Camille's presence grew like a silent shadow, whispering criticisms and judgments. It was during a harsh phone call with his brother Mark that Henry received a raw dose of the reality he faced. "You're throwing everything away, Henry. This story with Camille is going to destroy not only your reputation, but what our parents built. The company won't accept this." His brother's firm and disenchanted voice sounded like a warning, or perhaps a sentence. Henry held the phone tightly, gritting his teeth. The silence that followed a harsh word lingered between them before they hung up. It was no longer possible to escape the choices. However, the following Sunday, in the park where Lily laughed freely, Camille felt whole. Amidst dry leaves swirling with the warm morning wind and the distant sound of children playing, Henry and she shared glances that held silent promises. There, far from the cold rooms of power, they discovered the simplicity of a family forming with each gesture. It was Ray who brought her days later an invitation to a meeting of mothers linked to the group she had started attending, doubting her own strength. That support circle, made of intertwined stories of pain and dreams, gave her more than advice. It restored her certainty that she could fight. Meanwhile, the pressures within Hudson Corp intensified. The Foster family seemed willing to use all means, some even illegal, to bring Henry down and eliminate what they saw as a threat embodied in Camille. Tense meetings, planted rumors in the press, and anonymous letters began to be part of Henry's daily life, testing his limits. In the decisive meeting among the partners, Henry received a clear and cruel warning. If he did not distance himself from his relationship with Camille and her influence, her involvement in the social project linked to the company would result in his removal from the presidency. These were harsh words, an almost impossible ultimatum to refuse. That same day, as they returned to the apartment, the weight of the decision fell upon them like a storm after a storm. Camille looked into Henry's eyes, her voice trembling, her hands seeking reassurance on his face. "If it's up to you to choose, choose us. Because in the end, what will matter is the love we've built together." Henry, with his heart racing faster than the distant thunder that tore through the sky, squeezed her hand, as if holding on to that certainty was his last lifeline. In that moment, the course of the story they were building changed. More than a power decision, it was a choice for the life they wanted to have, full of risks and uncertainties, but also of hope and passion. New York remained indifferent, with its towering buildings cutting through the silhouette of the night, its streets bustling with people oblivious to the unfolding lives of that woman and that man. But for them, it was the stage for a silent revolution where they would break down barriers, social, familial, internal. And so, amidst fears and challenges, they realized that true courage does not stem from certainty, but from the faith that was born within them, in that small room illuminated by resistance, passion, and a love capable of transforming the impossible. United, Camille and Henry prepared to face whatever came their way, knowing that together they could dare more and dream further. The sun had barely risen when Henry woke with an unusual weight on his chest, as if the silent struggle he was waging within had found a new battlefield. The cold air seeping through the window cracks seemed to intensify the pressure he felt. On the other side of the city, Camille faced the morning with equally tumultuous thoughts, warming coffee in the makeshift kitchen of the apartment, while trying to organize the whirlwind of emotions threatening to derail her plans. Between phone calls that broke the morning silence and meetings that cut through the frantic routine of Hudson Corp, the shadow of pressure intensified. The conservative partners were skillfully rallying, reinforcing the hardline. Henry needed to relinquish Camille's influence, a move many deemed impossible for someone so passionate and stubborn. But he was not willing to yield. Not anymore. That same day, after a tense meeting with the board, Henry received an unexpected proposal from the most moderate advisor, Richard Allen, whose influence within the company was respected and feared. "Henry, no one here wants Hudson Corp to crumble," Richard said in a calm, almost paternal voice. "But your choices carry risks we cannot ignore. I propose a solution, a test. If you can prove that the partnership with Camille elevates the company's image and investments, we will reconsider your position." It was a chance, planted on mined ground, but a chance nonetheless. With his heart still racing, Henry shared the news with Camille that afternoon. She listened in silence, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and fear. She knew the challenge they faced could be the last card to keep what they had built. They decided together to transform the social project Camille coordinated into an irrefutable showcase of the positive impact they could generate. It was not just a gesture to appease the advisors, it was the realization of an old dream, the pursuit of justice and inclusion that Camille carried in her DNA. In the days that followed, the duo accelerated their agenda, meetings with community partners, events aimed at bridging different worlds, encounters with investors who had previously ignored the potential of that kind of work. Camille, with her unwavering authenticity, won hearts and minds, while Henry navigated the nuances of executive power with newfound determination. It was on a sunny morning, as they walked through the outskirts of New York to attend the inauguration of a daycare funded by the initiative, that an unexpected setback hit them. Some newspapers published anonymous articles suggesting that the resources for the social project were misappropriated funds from the company, serious accusations that threatened not only Henry's career but Camille's reputation as well. The impact was immediate. Questions from the partners increased, obligatory smiles began to turn into icy coldness, while rumors spread through the high society circles. Sitting at the table in the apartment that night, the silence between Henry and Camille was heavy, almost palpable. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers tightly. "They will try everything to bring us down," he said, looking into her eyes, filled with a vulnerability he rarely showed. "But we won't let them." Camille squeezed his hand, feeling the comforting warmth against her cold skin. "We fight for much more than a title or a company," she replied. "We fight for a future where no one has to hide who they are." Still, the strain was real. The pressure from the corporate world, social resistance, and veiled attacks began to take their toll. Henry's gaze, once cynical and closed off, now revealed a fragility he only allowed to that woman. And Camille, despite the strength she displayed, harbored doubts and fears hidden behind smiles and firm responses. It was on one of those tension-filled days that, upon arriving at a dinner with investors, Henry noticed the stark difference in the guests' reactions when Camille entered the hall. The reception, cold and silent, contrasted sharply with the warm smile she received on the streets of the neighborhood where the project thrived. In the car after the event, the distance between them felt greater than the few meters that separated them. "Those eyes tell me that the battle is far from over," Camille said, lowering her voice. "I think we need something more than proof and numbers to win these hearts." Henry looked at her through the rearview mirror, recognizing in that moment that the love he felt could not be protected merely by contracts or formal presentations. It would require taking risks, breaking invisible barriers, and more, after all, being willing to be defeated and rise again as many times as necessary. Deep down, both knew that this was just the first of many storms they would have to face. But they no longer feared fear. There was a certainty that drove them. Together, they could challenge any enemy, overcome any obstacle, and most importantly, transform their pain into strength, their passion into revolution. New York continued its frenetic pace, ignoring the lives struggling for a place in the sun. Henry and Camille, however, no longer hid in the shadows of doubt. Every step they took on that hostile ground was an act of courage and a silent declaration that true love can indeed challenge even the greatest storms. The city of New York pulsed under a sky heavy with clouds, announcing rain that seemed to reflect the tense atmosphere dominating Henry and Camille's apartment that morning. Outside, the noise of traffic mingled with distant sirens and the songs of the first birds, while inside that small refuge, tension silently seeped into the corners. Camille was sitting at the kitchen table, her gaze fixed on a text she was slowly reviewing, along with notes for the new social project that now needed to gain even more strength. Her hands trembled slightly, not only from nervousness, but from the weight of the impending challenge. The fight against prejudices, both social and corporate, seemed to grow with the same intensity as the approaching storm. Henry, on the other side of the room, stared out the window, arms crossed, his expression heavy. Behind his stern demeanor and firm gaze, a tumult of doubts and fears pulsed. The pressure from the Foster family had become an invisible yet suffocating chain that tightened around his neck with every decision made alongside Camille. "We need something that makes noise," Camille said, breaking the silence, her voice almost a whisper filled with determination. "Something the press can't ignore, something that leaves no room for doubt." Henry turned slowly, his eyes searching hers for the fire that encouraged him to persist. "What do you suggest?" She closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and said, "Let's organize a huge community event, an art and culture festival here in the outskirts, with children, youth, and local artists. We will show that the project is not just numbers. It's life, it's hope. If we can get real media support, not that sea of fake news and gossip, they will have to swallow it." His expression relaxed for a moment. A discreet smile appeared, the same one he reserved only for her when the world seemed a less hostile place. And thus began a new phase of the struggle. The following days were an incessant marathon. Camille rushed between meetings, phone calls, and visits to community leaders. Henry, for his part, used his influence to open doors, contact journalists, and ensure that the event had a loud and clear voice in the right channels. But the enemy, invisible yet persistent, did not rest. Anonymous letters began to return, veiled threats even reached Camille's cell phone, And once again fear tried to infiltrate that couple, attempting to break the bond that had so often defied the storm. On a grey afternoon, after receiving a hostile message, Camille sat on the couch, her body curled up, her eyes watery. Henry, entering at that moment, noticed the fragility she was resignedly hiding. "We can't let them win," he said, sitting beside her, his hands finding hers in a gesture that conveyed a mix of protection and equality. "I know, but sometimes it feels like the whole world is against us. I just want Lily to grow up in a place where she isn't judged by what we have or who we are." Henry ran his fingers through her hair, feeling the anxiety he himself felt multiply. "We will make everything work out. For her, for us, for the future we want. We cannot give in." The following night, the festival began with the dim light of improvised lanterns, the vibrant sound of drums, and voices singing stories of resistance and hope. Trucks filled with typical food, colorful stalls, and children running between the aisles formed a scene that seemed like an oasis amid the heavy atmosphere that the past months had brought. Henry and Camille moved through the crowd, hand in hand, exchanging smiles and quick words. Social differences, as if by magic, seemed to dissolve there, in the warmth of a hug, in the joyful dance of teenagers daring to dream. During a break, they both climbed onto the small stage they had prepared. Camille, with a firm voice, spoke about the importance of unity and respect, thanking the community for their support and emphasizing that the struggle was still long, but that day was proof that together they could win. Henry watched her with eyes full of admiration, understanding for the first time that his true legacy would not be in the walls of an office or in financial statements, but in the transformation he could help build in this place forgotten by the elite. As the festival lights illuminated the smiling faces around, a team of journalists captured every moment, ready to tell the story of resistance of that family who dared to challenge the system. That night, exhausted yet at peace, Henry and Camille embraced tightly, the distant sound of rain echoing outside, as if the city finally recognized the strength blossoming within. They knew the road would still be long, that many sandwiches of rejection, closed doors, and tears would still come, but they also knew that this time they were not alone. Amid the white noise of the storm and the pulse of life that resisted, Henry and Camille found in love the strength to continue writing their story. A story that sought not applause, but the construction of a world where dreams could flourish, even against all odds. The morning that followed the festival arrived shyly, with the sun filtering through. Among the still heavy clouds of the previous night, the streets of the outskirts began to come alive again. But for Camille and Henry, the pace still felt slowed down, as if the energy of that day had left them exhausted, yet fulfilled. In the small apartment where Camille lived, the simple furniture bore witness to their careful conversations, the hot coffee exuding an aroma that blended bitterness with the gentle sweetness of early achievements. Lily ran around the room with the typical energy of children, her crystal laughter filling the previously silent spaces. Henry, still wearing a wrinkled suit from fatigue, held the girl in his arms, his eyes conflicted between the man accustomed to control and the new vulnerability that this home demanded of him. "Do you really think it will work out?" he asked, his deep voice breaking the settled silence. Camille smiled with the calmness of someone who knows that the battle is just beginning. "It's not a matter of thinking. It's the only thing I know how to do. That's why we are here." He squeezed her hand, a silent gesture that spoke more than words. But the tranquility was merely a pause, the storm far from ceasing. That same day, the phone rang 3 times, and each call brought news that froze Camille's blood. The Hudson Core Board was determined to pressure Henry to break up with her. The company would hold a vote to decide the future of the presidency, and according to sources, Henry Foster, the relentless uncle, was already plotting a maneuver to bring him down. Meanwhile, Camille received invitations for interviews and events, a mix of necessary spotlight and veiled insinuations. The press, which on one hand praised her, on the other sought to catch her in flaws, contradictory feelings that threatened her peace of mind. At Hudson Corp headquarters, Henry found himself surrounded by gazes that did not hide hostility. With each step, a cruel reminder. His position was fragile, his allies few, but there was something new in his posture. The aura of someone who no longer bends, even knowing that the fall could be painful. They gathered that afternoon to decide the fate of the CEO. The cold room, with glass walls revealing the immense city around, took on an almost oppressive atmosphere where the tension was palpable. "Henry," began Henry Foster, his voice sharp, "your relationship with Ms. Camille is harming the business. We cannot allow personal interests to affect the company our ancestors built." Henry stood up, fists clenched, his voice low, but each word heavy with conviction. "What we are building is not a whim. It is a future. And that future includes what you do not see, the respect, dignity, and justice that this woman represents for me, and for millions." Silence settled like a weight. Then, to everyone's surprise, Richard Allen, a conservative yet secret admirer of Henry's courage, also stood up. "I support Henry. If Hudson Corp truly wants to survive, it needs to renew itself. This is more than money, it's legacy," he said, staring at the others with determination. The vote, though tight, leaned in favor of Henry's continuation, but with a condition imposed. He would have to present, in the short term, concrete goals that proved the viability of the social project and its positive impact on the company's finances. That night, tired from the meeting, Henry and Camille met in the refuge of their home. Without words, their gazes spoke. The struggle was hard, the daily battles, but they were united in a silent promise. Days later, as they revisited the project space together, where the walls still carried the smell of fresh paint and the laughter of children echoed, Henry felt the strength of that palpable reality. "This is where I need to be," he confessed, his voice choked with emotion he refused to hide. Camille smiled, feeling for the first time a true alliance. However, even with small triumphs, the system resisted. An unexpected phone call heralded the next dark chapter. A cold, unfamiliar voice announced, "Camille, we know where you are. If you want to avoid having facts from your past exposed, I advise you to disappear." The shock was great, and the feeling of vulnerability began to hover over every step. But this time, Henry did not back down. Upon hearing her account, he squeezed her hands firmly. "No one will silence us, not without a fight." They stood at a crossroads. The lie, the fear, the exposure, or the truth, the courage and the unity. The story they were building was more than just theirs. It was, after all, the voice of those trying to tear down invisible walls, and above all, a demonstration that love, when strengthened by struggle, can transform destiny. New York remained the city where dreams were lost and found, where what seemed impossible could be conquered by the restless gaze of those who refused to give up. Henry and Camille took a deep breath, ready for the next act, knowing that their intertwined lives were heading towards a revolution that no one could ever stop. The night covered New York like a heavy cloak, filled with distant lights that seemed to shine to hide secrets among alleys and skyscrapers. In Camille's simple apartment, the silence was not just an absence of sound, it was the accumulated tension of days when the anonymous threat loomed in the air, like thick fog making each step difficult. Henry stood by her side, firm yet aware that the battle had transcended the corporate realm. Now, the enemy attacked from the shadows, manipulating fears that felt like old nightmares. He held Camille's hands tightly, trying to convey all the protection he could offer. "We won't let them destroy us with lies," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper among the sounds of the city that never sleeps. Camille nodded, but her eyes revealed the invisible weariness. I know. It will be difficult, but we will respond by showing who we really are. The truth has a strength that no threat can overcome. The next day, Henry reached out to his network to surround what could be an imminent attack. He hired a discreet team to ensure the safety of Camille and the small family they had built. Every step, every call was monitored with caution. Meanwhile, Camille doubled her efforts on the social project, determined to demonstrate not only human impact, but also concrete and transparent results that could counter any slander. When news of the threat leaked to the Hudson Corp board, some of the voices that once condemned the relationship between Henry and Camille began to waver. A subtle fear of involvement and exposure took hold. The power play was now taking on dangerous and unpredictable contours. Amid this scenario, Camille was invited to a community radio program, a space where she could speak directly to the population she loved and defended. At that microphone, her voice sounded strong, yet filled with contained emotion. "I'm not perfect, nor do I intend to be, but I am a woman who fights for dignity, for respect, and for a better future for all children who deserve to grow up free from prejudice and injustice." She made her message clear to the listeners. "I know many try to silence us, but what keeps me strong is the certainty of love and truth." The impact of that speech echoed strongly on social media and in business circles. The public was divided between those who supported her and those who were still resistant, but something had changed. The narrative was beginning to shift. Meanwhile, Henry was preparing his goal presentation for the board, knowing that this moment could seal his future in the company and consequently the fate of the social project they embraced. That night, in front of a window that opened to the skyline that never sleeps, he felt the weight of responsibility crushing his shoulders, but also an inner fire that refused to be extinguished. On the day of the decisive meeting, the auditorium was packed. The atmosphere was one of anticipation and tension. Henry took the stage, his speech carefully rehearsed, yet delivered with the true passion that sprang from his soul. He presented numbers, graphs, testimonials, and above all, human stories that showed how social investment brought real and tangible benefits, from reduced absenteeism among employees thanks to a stronger community, to increased productivity and a positive company image. Camille stood by, not leaving her spot, her eyes meeting his a few times, reinforcing the silent alliance between them. When he finished, silence filled the space. A few minutes later, applause erupted. First timidly, then with contagious strength, Richard Allen, enthusiastic, stood up and declared, "Henry proved that it is possible to align profit and purpose, that Hudson Corp can be a force for real transformation. I fully support your project and your continuation as president." Other board members followed suit, and the vote ended in a narrow but definitive victory. Outside, as the fine rain began to fall, Henry and Camille embraced with the intensity of those who had won a crucial battle, but knowing that the war was still ongoing. In the following weeks, the visibility of the social and environmental project grew, along with the hope for broader transformation. However, the persecution did not cease. Shadows from Camille's past threatened to resurface, and invisible enemies were still plotting. But there, in that moment of hard-won victory, Henry and Camille found the strength to believe that love could truly be the most powerful weapon against prejudice, fear, and lies. And so, while New York never stopped, they continued writing their story, amidst encounters and misunderstandings, challenges and achievements, with the certainty that together nothing could bring them down. Henry's victory at the board meeting seemed to finally usher in a new phase for him and Camille. The social project gained momentum, filling the neighborhood with the laughter of children, gatherings among neighbors, and a hope that shone even in the tired eyes of those facing the city's harshness. However, New York showed that the struggle never ceased, and the challenges yet to come loomed like shadows stretching at the end of the afternoon. The morning after the meeting with investors, Camille prepared breakfast, while the sun timidly filtered through the window of the modest kitchen. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the smell of warm bread she had just taken out of the oven, a simple comfort amid the turmoil. Lily, their daughter, ran down the hallway, her childish joy a delicate counterpoint to the atmosphere of uncertainty shared by the adults. Henry walked in through the door, his suit still impeccable, but his eyes revealing a mix of fatigue and determination. "How is Lily today?" he asked, adjusting his tie as he approached the table. "Excited for school. She was talking about the activities at daycare yesterday." Camille smiled, exchanging glances with him that reflected a possible new beginning. "How did the meeting go?" she asked, and Henry nodded, pulling out a chair to sit. "I expected more resistance, but they seemed curious. It's still early to say, but I managed to plant a seed." The sounds of the city entered through the open window, a vibrant mix of honks, hurried footsteps, and voices echoing down the avenue. The metropolis did not forgive, but it also did not stop. By the end of the afternoon, amidst computer screens and piles of documents, Camille received the message that chilled her veins. "Buried secrets come back to destroy those you love. Be careful." She nearly dropped her phone. Henry, attentive, saw her tremble. "Again?" His voice came out firm, despite the evident concern. "Yes," she replied, quickly wiping away the tears that insisted on surfacing. "But I won't run away." Not this time. The shadow of the past threatened to emerge, trying to undermine everything they built with sweat and courage. News began to be manipulated, spread, permeating social media with distorted information, planting doubts in the public opinion that fed on scandals. Henry acted quickly. He called trusted journalists and prepared a press conference where they would present their side of the story together. Camille, despite her fear, felt courage growing inside her like a flame fueled by love and truth. That day, in front of the cameras and flashes, Henry spoke with the calmness of someone who knows that justice is not in the courts, but in the hearts that connect. "Love and truth are the only weapons we have against prejudice," he said, looking at Camille with an intense glow. She then took the floor. Her voice trembled at first, revealing all the humanity behind that firm and determined woman. "My past does not define me. I am the sum of the choices I made, the battles I faced, and most importantly, the desire to build something better, not just for myself, but for our community." The words echoed far beyond that moment, breaking invisible barriers and strengthening a chain of solidarity that began to emerge. In the following days, the reaction on social media and in real life was a mix of unconditional support and fierce resistance. But Henry and Camille's battle was far from solitary. Bonds of friendship, unexpected partnerships, and the power of true storytelling began to turn the tide. On a warm Sunday, they found a rare moment of peace and normalcy in the vibrant Washington Square Park, a pulsating stage of culture and urban struggles. Amidst timid laughter and iced coffees, they talked about dreams and futures, about the city that shaped and challenged them. "We can change this place," Henry whispered, holding her hand firmly. "Together, no one will hold us back," Camille replied, her eyes shining with the certainty of their shared fight. As the metropolis around them spun in frenzy, they found in love the anchor that kept them steady and ready to move forward. They knew the road would be arduous, with confrontations, losses, and dilemmas still awaiting them, but the revolution they were starting was more than a business project or a simple love story. It was the irrefutable demonstration that the courage of a restless heart can break walls, confront prejudices, and transform destinies where least expected. And as New York continued to pulse relentlessly, they kept building their story hand in hand, ready for whatever the future dared to bring. Because for Henry and Camille, true power lies not in status, but in the unity forged from truth, love, and persistence. The sunset lazily fell over New York, tinting the sky with gold and orange, while the city vibrated to an electrifying rhythm. Henry and Camille wandered down Broadway amidst hurried faces, the graffiti that colored the walls, and the sweet aroma of coffee wafting from the storefronts. Their intertwined hands translated more than affection. They were a silent pact of unity, resistance, and hope. In recent days, their lives had been a roller coaster of emotions and challenges. The message they received that morning still pulsed in Camille's mind. The unexpected invitation from an important civil society group to support the affordable housing project. It was the chance she had been fighting for years, a decisive step towards transforming the neighborhood into something worthy, fair, and visible. "Henry," she whispered, squeezing his arm, her eyes sparkling under the warm glow of the streetlight. "Maybe this is the moment we've been waiting for. I can't let it slip away." He smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility mixed with relief. "Let's go together. Whatever you need, you can count on me." It was a strange feeling, this mix of hope and caution. Today they knew the price victories could demand, resisting veiled attacks, facing suspicious glances, and dealing with the weight of past ghosts that insisted on tightening their chests. A few days later, in a tense session at the city council, Henry and Camille faced the fierce opposition of those who did not want to see the transformation they proposed. Careful words, speeches disguised as economic concern hid the real intent, to maintain the status quo and prevent the periphery from dreaming big. "They don't want to lose control," Camille murmured, her voice choked as she shook her head. "But we can't back down. For our people, for the future." Henry broke the silence, his voice low and firm. "The strength is in the community. As long as we are united, they can't stop us." This strength began to manifest in the clearest ways. Cultural demonstrations in Washington Square Park, spontaneous gatherings, an online mobilization that quickly won the heart and voice of the neighborhood. The beats of drums, the dance choreographies, the songs carried the resistance made of hope, a call to rewrite history. And as the city pulsed with that energy, something unexpected happened. An investigative journalist, known for her work revealing injustices, took it upon herself to tell their story, not through the lenses of sensationalism, but with the sensitivity that was lacking in traditional media. Her words opened doors for new discussions, humanized the struggle, and gave a female, black and real face to the transformation. "Look at this, Henry," Camille said, holding the tablet with trembling hands, her eyes misty. "Finally, people will understand that our challenges are more than political problems. They are lives." Henry moved closer, putting his arm around her shoulders. "The truth we show is what no one can take away." But the couple's enemies were still lurking. At an event mixing businessmen and high society figures on Fifth Avenue, Martin Taylor appeared, Henry's former partner and rival, loaded with resentment and sharp words. "I thought you had learned by now, Henry," Martin said with a cold smile. "It's pointless to paint the past with new colors. The farce has its limits." Henry took a deep breath, the anger contained in his voice. "Our present is the only truth that matters. I won't waste time with those who want to live in the past." Camille, feeling the tension rise, squeezed his arm, making it clear that together nothing would shake them. They left there aware that certain battles weren't worth fighting with harsh words, but with the strength of daily efforts and tangible changes. On quiet nights, when Lily was already peacefully asleep, the two reviewed plans among papers, numbers and dreams, written in notebooks filled with notes. "It's hard," Henry admitted, his voice hoarse in the softly lit room by the lamp's glow, "but we can't take our foot off the gas. We're doing this for more than just ourselves," Camille smiled with a determined air. "For us, for our daughter, and for everyone who deserves a real chance." Outside, New York didn't stop. The honking, the smell of street food wafting through the streets, the vibrant city that never slept. It was the perfect backdrop for a silent war, for a revolution made with the courage of those who refused to be silenced. And so, hand in hand, day after day, Henry and Camille continued writing a story that transcended themselves. A story of love and resistance, of undeniable truths, and a future that would still be conquered step by step. Because true power, the kind that changes destinies, isn't in the shine of appearances or imposed titles, but in the strength of those who know that unity, honesty, and determination are the greatest weapons one can carry in their heart. The New York dawn was silent, except for the distant whisper of cars and the gentle sound of the wind coming through the cracks of the slightly open window. Henry and Camille were still awake, the kitchen table illuminated by the flickering light of a single bulb. Among cooling coffee cups and scattered papers, they discussed the final details of the project that could change the reality of those families, turning their dreams into solid foundations. "We've already obtained most of the documents," Camille commented, organizing the files, "but we still need the city's approval to move forward with the construction." Henry shook his head, worry etched in the lines of his face. "Bureaucracy will try to delay and complicate things. We know that, but we'll find a way. This time, I'm determined not to let anyone hold us back." Camille smiled, and for a moment, fatigue gave way to hope. "We need to join forces, Henry. The communities are mobilizing, and every voice that rises weighs more than any bureaucrat." At that moment, while they planned the next step, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Startled, they exchanged quick glances, and carefully, Camille went to open the door. On the other side, a familiar figure was watching them. "Good evening," said Lily, the community leader who had been gaining strength in the local battles. "Lily," Henry greeted her with a firm hug. "What a surprise at this hour. I came to let you know that the group has organized a new demonstration for this week," she explained, her gaze determined. "It's going to be bigger than the last one, because this time everyone knows we're not just fighting for a piece of land, but for dignity." Camille slowly closed the door, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. "That's what we need," she commented to Henry as they returned to the table, "an army united against the invisible barriers." In the following days, the neighborhood was buzzing. Colorful posters, drums, and chants echoed through the streets. Meetings took place in small, improvised locations: a church hall, a public school, the corner of a bar that served the best street food in the area. Every voice mattered, every face carried the hope for change. However, not all battles were fought in the streets. One morning, Henry received a phone call that made him freeze for a few seconds. On the other end of the line, a firm and cutting voice. "Henry, be careful. Your enemies don't sleep," warned a discreet informant, making it clear that the pressure on the couple was increasing. At the same time, an anonymous video began circulating on social media, attempting to undermine Camille's work, insinuating corruption and mismanagement. It was the kind of attack they feared, precise and cruel, capable of undermining the trust built with so much effort. Camille, aware of the news, maintained a firm stance. She called a meeting with her team and prepared a clear and transparent response to counter the accusation. "These battles are part of the game," she told Henry after a grueling day, "but we will never let lies silence us." In that daily effort, the couple grew stronger and discovered a confidence that only real challenges can forge. Amid the difficulties, small and precious moments illuminated their journeys. A heartfelt conversation under the dim light of the room, Lily's smile running in the park, the tight hug after yet another long meeting. On a cold morning, Henry and Camille walked along 23rd Street, observing the waking city. The chaotic flow of cars, the strong smell of coffee being sold at the corners, and the distant murmur of the subway created a scene of urgency, but also of vitality. "We're going to make it," Henry said, his voice filled with determination. "If not, what would all this struggle have been for?" She looked at him with a deep glow. "The victory isn't just ours," Camille replied. "It belongs to those people who see in us a real chance for a fresh start. to Lily, to Mrs. Smith, to the boy playing in the park. As they spoke, the sun, breaking through the clouds, created a prism of colors over the old facades, as if the entire city were painting a new future for them and so many others. But fate, capricious and complex, reserved. In the following week, during a decisive meeting with city officials, an unexpected condition arose. Support was contingent upon the partial withdrawal of the project from the most impactful areas, precisely where the community needed it the most. "They want to cut the heart out of the project," complained Camille, her hands trembling with frustration. "Without that, the change loses its meaning." Henry took a deep breath, the kind he did when he needed to find strength in his voice. "We will not accept blackmail. The community is tired of empty promises. Either the city supports the complete transformation, or it does not support it at all. It's that simple." Gathered with community leaders, the couple intensified their mobilization, making it clear that they would not negotiate anyone's basic rights. At that moment, more than ever, Henry and Camille recognized themselves as leaders not just of a project, but of a profound transformation that affected hearts and entire cities. The battle was being won gradually, with firm steps, courage, and the certainty that the love that united them gave meaning to everything. And while New York resisted, they resisted with it, because some stories made of truth and bravery are priceless and do not give up. The day dawned gray, but inside the community hall, the air was charged with energy and determination. Henry and Camille were surrounded by local leaders, families, and young people engaged in the fight for the housing project that had already become a symbol of resistance for the neighborhood. The walls, worn by time, carried stories of old battles and now housed that new hope. "We cannot accept that they cut the most vulnerable part of the project," Henry said firmly, his eyes fixed on the gathered group. "To concede would be to betray those who need it the most." The murmurs around them turned into agreement. Camille held his hand for a moment, conveying strength. "Lily is right," she stated, looking into the eyes of those present. "We will show that these lands are ours by right. We will organize a peaceful occupation, but one that partners with those who do not intend to back down." In the streets, the neighborhood began to transform again. Colorful flags adorned lampposts, and every corner vibrated with the voices of the residents. Entire families, children and the elderly came together to defend their space, united by a greater dream. Henry and Camille exchanged tired smiles, aware of the strength emerging from each collective gesture. During a warm afternoon, while distributing cold water to those present at the occupation, Camille was approached by a group of journalists eager to hear the true story behind the headlines. "This fight is not just for houses," she declared into the microphone. "It is for dignity and respect for a community that has been forgotten for too long." Support was growing, but along with it came pressures and threats. Henry received a suspicious call, alerting him to an attempt at a more aggressive boycott and the circulation of false news by groups interested in undermining the trust they had built. Camille faced everything with the serenity of someone carrying a greater cause in her heart. In a meeting with her team, they devised a strategy to clarify the information and reinforce the project's transparency. They knew they would win, not just for justice, but for the clarity of truth. In that daily struggle, small moments of affection and lightness continued to nourish the couple's strength. Amid difficult agreements and late-night meetings, they found time for memories, plans, and the smiles of Lily running through the park. On an autumn morning, while walking down 23rd Street, observing the city's incessant ebb and flow, Henry spoke softly. "If we don't believe, who will?" Camille squeezed his hand with tenderness and confidence. "It's not just for us, it's for every person who deserves a real chance." But the challenge was not over yet. In a crucial meeting at City Hall, pressures arose to reduce the project, especially in critical areas for the community. They want to dilute the change, Camille said, her voice choked with indignation. Without these areas, the transformation loses all meaning. Henry closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, he spoke with the determination that had become his unmistakable trademark. We will not negotiate dignity. Either this project is made for everyone, or it will not be made at all. The couple turned to the community, expanding the mobilization, calling everyone to reinforce the commitment to the truth and the inalienable rights of that people. Meanwhile, a tempting proposal arrived. An influential investor offered resources for the project, but with impossible clauses that would compromise the principles defended by Henry and Camille. Easy money always comes at a high price, Camille commented, understanding the risk. In the meeting with the investor, Henry made it clear that he would not give up the values that sustained the entire struggle. Our victory must be integral, he stated, not negotiated in exchange for advantages. The community grew in support. Local artists began to engage, their voices echoing in shows and campaigns. Colorful posters spread messages of hope through the streets, and the silence that had once been present transformed into shouts of resistance and faith. At the height of this mobilization, on the night before the decisive vote at the city council, Henry and Camille reviewed their strategies, going over speeches and documents under the yellowed light of the room. The tension hung in the air, but their mutual confidence dissipated the fears. In the chamber, Camille moved everyone with her simple and true speech. We are the stories of this neighborhood, the lives that want to build something better. We are not fighting just for land, we are fighting for a dignified future. As they listened, many felt the strength of that place pulsating in every word. The vote, close, ended favorably for the project in its entirety. When they left the city council together, the light rain that fell seemed to wash away the fatigue and uncertainties. The shared smile was a reflection of what they had always known. The power to change the world lies in the courage of people who never give up, in the unity that withstands any storm. Henry and Camille then continued, stronger and more united, to write. A story that transcended time, because true legacy is not in titles or wealth, but in the persistence of those who believe in change. Let us know in the comments which city you are watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Please give us a like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this.